Hey, Steve Saretsky here. As always, Canadian real estate market update, in particular focus on Vancouver. If you get sort of value entertainment out of these videos, all I ask you hit thumbs up and subscribe. Questions, comments, put those below. Last week, I put out a video basically talking about financial institutions, large corporations getting involved in the real estate market, particularly the residential resale market. So you had companies, massive financial institutions such as BlackRock, basically going in and buying up swaths of single-family houses in the resale market, basically competing with the average Joe. And obviously, there is a lot of pushback against this. We talk about housing affordability, basically the dream of home ownership essentially being evaporated as institutions come into the space. At the time, I said, there's at least not yet. There wasn't anything in Canada. Ironically enough, it was about 2 or 3 days later, the Globe and Mail put out a piece announcing that a Toronto condo developer that's in the condo development space is now starting basically a fund raising money where they're going to start buying up single-family homes in the greater Toronto area. I think it worked out to about 800 houses or something like that. So small scale to start with, but I think we kind of get an early glimpse of where that is ultimately heading. And I understand the negative feedback around that. There is actually some people that I respect in the industry that have been very pro reining in overheated housing market, advocating to policymakers for credit tightening, foreign buyers taxes, and the likes. And some of them actually like the fact that you have financial institutions or corporations coming in and buying single-family rentals because they're viewing it as security. So, okay, what is the, let me unwind before this unravels and we get about 1,000 negative comments below, because I will start by saying my first initial view of this, and still probably is that I think that morally it feels wrong to me. I think you kind of have to draw a line somewhere. So to think multi-trillion dollar companies such as BlackRock should be allowed to compete in the resale market? No. Do I think that they should be allowed to add supply, build new single-family homes to rent out? Yes. But the argument basically is when a lot of people buy single-family homes, in my experience as a realtor, a lot of the times people are buying it just because they want the security. They say, okay, well, we've been renting this house, we've been renting this condo, and every year or two our landlord decides to sell, we got to up and leave, and we're tired of packing up all our stuff and leaving and moving, especially when you have a couple kids. And so what I tend to find is people are basically feel like they're compelled or they're almost forced to buy, a house for their family so they can have that security and that peace of mind and knowing that they don't have to, they're not going to get a knock on the door one day telling them they got to leave. And so one of the guys that I respect, I'll leave his name out of this for now, he's looking at it and saying, well, if we have a massive financial corporation that is willing to provide long-term tenancy, like basically a secured single-family house rental, that will arguably potentially pull some demand away from them. It gives them an alternative for maybe buying, right? I mean, at least what we see here in Vancouver, there's typically a premium on these purpose-built rental apartment buildings. People are willing to pay higher rents because they know that if they go into them, you can live in that apartment building for 20, 30 years and never get kicked out because the building doesn't sell. It's a purpose-built rental. It's built to rent out. So it's not like you're buying off an individual investor. And so he's looking at this and saying, well, this could be an alternative. Now we have single-family rentals. But again, that's neither here nor there. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of debates and comments below. But I understand this is a very, very heated debate. But I want to really emphasize on why this is happening. I think look no further than, ironically, this past week, the Greek 5-year bond went negative. Don't forget, this is a sovereign that about a decade ago defaulted on their debt obligations. So they obviously go through the entire restructuring, yada yada. Greece has defaulted on their debt 5 times in recent history. So this is now a country that has their 5-year government bond with a negative nominal forget real interest rates, a negative nominal interest rate. So, you look at this and say, okay, well, I mean, who the hell would buy a negative earning, negative yielding Greek debt instrument? I mean, unless you really believe that rates are going to go severely negative so you can get some capital appreciation on that bond, it really makes no sense to buy it. But you have to understand that there's a lot of financial institutions, pension funds, etc., that are essentially mandated to actually buy a percentage of government debt. And of course, we all realistically know that the ECB, the European Central Bank, is really the sole largest buyer of all this debt. And obviously, when you can print your own currency, it doesn't matter what yield they're getting on the bond. So, but now this again going back, this obviously creates a scenario where, okay, well, why are these institutions like BlackRock and whatnot entering into the housing market? Well, again, you've basically just eviscerated. These are institutions that need to earn a return. They have investors. They've got people that want to retire. All these boomers retiring. We got to hit these rates of return. And if we've got a portion of our capital tied up in the government bond, we've got to go further out in the risk curve, and that's why they're entering into the single-family rental market. So I think it's important to understand, where is your disdain or where is your anger directed at? I mean, I think you have to understand that these companies like BlackRock are making the rational decision, which is we need to earn returns. If the government and central banks are doing this, you leave us no choice. And so, again, these are the part of the repercussions, obviously, we've talked about. And we can see this now. We look at it and showing up, right? I mean, where is the capital going into? The capital is going into alternative asset classes. We know real estate has obviously been a beneficiary of that. National home prices, as we've talked about numerous times on the show, up 24% on a year-over-year basis for the month of May, and that is a record all-time price acceleration as measured by the home price index. So you've got the fastest pace of home price appreciation that we have ever seen, obviously, over the past 12 months. And that number will continue to tick higher despite what I would clearly quantify as a slowing housing market. This, don't get me wrong. So if you look strictly at the headline, which is national home prices up to record highs, that doesn't paint the entire picture. That's sort of a lagging indicator. What I'm seeing, everything in the data, we've got sales slowing down consecutively on a month-over-month basis. We've clearly put in the sort of the tops, at least for this near-term cycle. And here we're going to watch this moving forward. Now, one of the things I want to get on here is this is a national home price index. So you have to understand that it's not perfect. There are regions or pockets that are extremely, in my opinion, overvalued, and then you got some undervaluation. But look at the one that I want to point out here, because I'll never forget. I was actually looking about 2 years ago into this property market and go, man, it's cheap. I think they were about 7. It was a 7 cap. They had 7 caps. It was in New Brunswick. And I was like, man, it was just too far for me. I just didn't want to get on 3 planes and travel all across the country just to manage a rental property over there. But this market, Moncton, New Brunswick, small town, over the past decade, Moncton new home prices have appreciated by 21% over 10 years. So very, very minimal price appreciation. Over the last decade, 21% they have increased. Now, over the last 12 months alone, Moncton home prices have increased by 33%. So you've had more price growth in the past 12 months than you have in the entire decade. Now, to me, that screams red flag. Now, don't get me wrong, that market was, in my opinion, undervalued from the get-go. But to see it accelerate, to see house prices accelerate by 33% in a year is not normal activity. It's not sustainable pace of growth. And so I don't like to give predictions, but what I can say is for the majority of the nation's housing market, I would not be surprised that you have in the next 12 months, you have a correction in those markets, right? Would I be surprised here in Vancouver if house prices came off 5 to 10% after going up 30% in the last 12 months? I would not be surprised. But again, these things everyone's looking for the crystal. I don't have the crystal ball. That's my personal view, is I wouldn't be surprised. I put the probability on it as, I put the probability on that as, I don't know if I'd say high, but probably 60%. I feel like that's a probability that you get a correction there. Now, because I've been fielding this question a lot from just people in general that call me. Okay, let me correct there for a minute, because again, we talked about potentially undervalued markets. I still look at a market that I'm actually invested in, Calgary, Alberta. That, keep in mind, prices literally have moved sideways for a decade. They have not moved in a decade. In fact, the house that I bought there, the property that I bought, big lot, inner city, with the ability to get rezoned into duplex, so it has upzone potential. I bought this lot for less, to be exact, $20,000 less than the guy paid for it in 2007. So in my opinion, this is a market that is still undervalued. It's a major metro city that basically, yes, the prices are going up right now over the past 12 months like everywhere else has, but it didn't move for more than a decade. So, and this is with incomes that are higher than Greater Vancouver, for example. So robust population growth, actually stronger population growth than most of the country. And so it has a lot going on for it. Yes, it does have urban sprawl, etc. So anyways, that's neither here nor there. So, but what I want to bring this ultimately back to is I'm getting a lot of calls, questions, emails. I get bombarded. And a lot of the times it's the same question, right? And the question is like, oh, should I buy this house? And I think we have to distinguish that, first of all, these are personal decisions. Buying your primary residence versus buying an investment property are two different things. If you're buying your investment property, if you're buying a primary residence, I personally look at it as less of an investment, and it's more of an emotional need and want. Like, I just think I look at it completely different. I mean, I feel that a lot of people that are actually buying, again, are buying for security purposes. They're buying to fulfill a need to sort of settle down, create a home for their family. Like, I don't look at it necessarily as an investment, but like if you're buying today, so if you're buying a single family house that just went up 30%, you have to have an acknowledgement, or you have to mentally be okay that, hey, if you buy, hypothetically on paper, in 12 months time, it could be down. The value could be down. It just went up 30%. So I think it's important to distinguish. Now, again, if you come to me and you say, hey, I'm a single family home builder, I build on spec, should I buy a piece of land today? Well, the answer is, I would say, is probably not. Because the prices just went up 30%. And for you as a spec builder, you need to exit in 18 months. So you need to exit in 18 months. That means basically, okay, so you're hoping essentially that the market either stays where it is now or goes up in 18 months. That is a much riskier gamble than someone that's buying a single family residence to live in for the next 10 years. That is going to have a family there. So there's two very, very important distinctions that need to be made here. So again, that's ultimately how I look at it. I mean, I know there's going to be a whole bunch of people up in arms about renting versus owning, and there's no right or wrong answer here. It's just understanding what are your emotional needs. Like, for a lot of people, buying a primary residence doesn't make sense, or you shouldn't make sense. I have comments on here where people come and they say, oh, I make X amount. I think it's a I'm not going to say the amount. I think it's a small amount. And, I'm, 23, 24, 25 years old and I can't buy a home. It's like, well, you're only 24 years old. Maybe you shouldn't buy a home. Maybe you should continue to rent for the next 3-4 years while you build up your capital base and you build up your career. Maybe that should be your focus. So there's all these different avenues that we can go down. I hate giving blanket advice to people, but what I will do is educate people on the housing market so you can make an informed decision. Hopefully this brought some value and entertainment. As always, we'll see you next week.